Frank, maybe I can start with some of that, because it's a complicated world when you get into the regulatory fronts. Nothing becomes simple. Even if it looks logical, that doesn't mean the decision would be made in the favor of what looks logical. But I think it's incumbent on the energy industry, electric and gas utilities, to try and find some common inroads. Now, if I just look at our peers, I'm going to suggest that maybe the pipeline sector would be an early advocate of some of this. I think the electric companies, by and large, are still trying to figure out threat or opportunity when it comes to distributed generation. So it may be that fuel cells need to find a way to partner up alongside other distributed generation that can solve some of the issues that the electric utilities are going to face. But there's no doubt in my mind they could spend billions on new transmission and other wire side reinforcement, or they could start to have a portfolio of solutions with that investment, maybe some strategically placed distributed generation owned by the utilities. You could have electrical energy storage matched up with fuel cells as generation, and electric utilities could rent that to a hospital that also needs backup services. So the game is limitless when you start to allow creativity to say, how can I get the costs of this down? But to me, the utilities, pipeline and gas, have that long-term investment horizon. So they're going to have patient capital more so than the private sector. And so your early friends as a fuel cell industry, where you're growing into commercialization, you're still working to get costs down, somehow those utility companies that do have that long-term outlook on getting a return are going to be more favorable if you can demonstrate reliability. The first thing any of those companies are going to look at is, A, is it safe? B, is it reliable? So there's maybe a little bit of proving work to do, but where you can, I think it's a logical next step.
I just want to add on that there are some creative ways and means. The answer doesn't necessarily have to reside within what you describe as rate base. There are some creative things that can be put in place. As an example, there in the state of Georgia, we have the ability to fund projects that are either economic development in nature or have some renewable attributes, or that we know will improve the efficiency of a particular customer's energy usage. So we have the ability in a non-jurisdictional framework to charge that customer to invest the capital on behalf of the customer, to then charge that customer through a special tariff that then is recovered through the billing. And so there are other ways and means that these things can be done depending on the regulatory environment that you're in. Doesn't necessarily have to be rate-based.
I think just to jump on that, because I think there are some good points that Ralph raised in putting that together. I think, part of it is looking at the investment. We talked about infrastructure earlier. That's all rate-based, and you evaluate the electric infrastructure a little bit differently than you evaluate the gas infrastructure, but it's all energy in the end. Shouldn't there be some rationalization of that and deciding where you want to put the money that you've got, the limited amount of capital that you can invest? And I don't remember how many zeros were in the first number you mentioned, Ralph, but I remember they were a lot. And if you could take a small part of that and use it for distributed generation, use it for renewable energy, really create a larger portfolio, a more robust energy environment, everybody sort of wins at that point. I think, fuel cells, we've been talking about that among ourselves for a very long time, and it's hard to get people to understand and be educated about that. But sort of looking at, decoupling, we talked about that a little bit earlier, where, the return on the invested capital is a little bit different than simply selling either gas or electrons. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, but you have to sort of come up again with an energy policy that makes some sort of coherent sense.
Yeah, just one more quick comment on it. My first reaction to your question was absolutely. And I'll give you a quick example. when we were putting together the vision for the smart energy future, one of the things that's pointed out is essentially to have a smart system where everyone benefits and where the opportunity is there to really optimize the energy use and low carbon and so forth. A number of utilities pointed out to us that they were essentially restricted in being able to optimize their investment in their communication system, because really what a smart system is two-way communication and data management. And the communication system is tremendously expensive. Well, rather than looking at that as a cooperative effort between the two utilities, it was looked at as by the regulators as being one subsidizing the other. So it was prohibited. Well, I won't go any further than that. But then you can appreciate where the real benefit is if you were to optimize. If your goal is to optimize the energy system, you really have to look at that differently.
Frank, just one other point
We'll
on
leave
this.
this till I get a couple of questions out here in the audience. No, keep going.
Okay,
I wanna
yeah, so just real
make this the
quickly,
last.
the importance of a solid regulatory structure, it can't be overlooked, because in natural gas, you know, there's some opportunities there for waste heat recovery at some large compressor stations. Some places have used it, other places haven't, because of the power brokering deals, you know, which I'm not too familiar with. But if the atmosphere is not right from a regulatory perspective, therefore the millions of dollars of investment needed isn't going forward because the money's not working out the right way. So,
Bob, I want to come back to that point later after I get these questions off, and that is a topic of the role of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission in all this. But I see Pete Devlin patiently standing over there looking for a question to be answered.
Probably not the first one. I think it was over here first, and then Sunita. Okay, I'll go. Frank and panel, I've spent a lot of time in the last several years as part of my duties at DOE talking to utilities about the use of fuel cells relative to other energy conversion technologies. And I get the same arguments over and over again. First of all, you got to understand the industry is very conservative, risk averse. So they're always looking for the lowest possible first cost. So the argument that I continually get from them is